Sometimes life intertwines our paths with unexpected events that may seem random, but ultimately change everything. The story you are about to hear is about how two people, meeting in an unusual place at an unusual time, transformed their lives beyond recognition. It's a tale of love, second chances, family, and the importance of having faithful companions on the path to happiness. Immerse yourself in this captivating narrative of life's twists and turns, which gives us hope for a brighter future, even when it seems like all is lost. I walked into the lounge to get a drink. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but I had just left my lawyer's office. I wanted a divorce. There were very few people in the lounge between lunch and dinner. Joe, the bartender, asked me if I was having a bad day. "You could say that." "I just applied for a divorce from Linda," I replied. "Sorry to hear that. How long have the two of you been together?" Joe asked. "It will be 20 years next month. The divorce should be in November if she doesn't fight it, which I'm pretty sure she won't." I looked around and saw a nice-looking woman sitting in a booth by herself. I asked Joe if he knew her, and he told me her name was Beth and her divorce was final today. I decided to talk to her. "Hi, my name is Jay. Do you mind if I join you?" "I don't think I would be the best company, and besides, I'm not looking, if you know what I mean," she replied. "I understand. Joe told me your divorce was final today, and I filed for mine today." "It would just be nice to have someone to talk to," I said. She looked up at me and stared for a few seconds. "Go ahead and sit down, Jay. By the way, my name is Beth, and I am now single again after 6 years of marriage. I will have been married 20 years next month. Do you want to exchange stories?" I asked. Beth smiled at me. I told her that I hadn't eaten today and asked her if she would like some lunch. We were both drinking by this time, so it sounded like a good idea. I called Joe over, and we each ordered a Reuben sandwich and fries. I asked Joe to bring us each another drink also. Wow, the same taste in food. That was a good start. She was a nice-looking woman, probably in her early 30s. I guess I would call her the girl next door type. If I were a kid, you never pay a lot of attention to her until you look deeper. She thanked me for sitting with her, said she was quite depressed, but having someone to talk to helped. She began to tell me a little about herself as we ate lunch. "I was born and raised here. I went to college to become a teacher. I always loved kids. I've been teaching at the elementary school for 8 years. I dated a little, but nothing serious happened till I met Ray. He's my now ex-husband. He was a salesman who sold sound equipment to schools. When I first saw him, we kind of connected. We talked for a while, and the next time he came to the school, he asked me out. The rest is pretty much the normal dating scene. 6 months later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Our life was rather normal. I worked at the school, and he did his sales. He would sometimes be gone for a couple of days on trips, but that was expected. There was nothing in our lives that would jump out at you. We went out once in a while, saw movies, and danced, although I was never the greatest dancer. He wanted kids, and we tried. After a couple of years, I went to a specialist, and she told me I could have kids, but it would be harder due to my physical conditions. The doctor said my tests came back, and it would just be harder for me to conceive. I even took some drugs to help, but no results. Ray started to become irritated with me, but there wasn't much I could do. We seemed to be growing farther and farther apart. I told him we could adopt, and he told me he didn't want someone else's kid, he wanted his own. I didn't have that problem. I was with kids every day, and I loved them all. I didn't really miss not having any. When I got home, it was where I got away from kids for the evening. I still wouldn't have minded having my own, but I wanted to have them for Ray. Then last year, he came home and told me we had to talk. I knew there was something wrong when he told me he had an affair with his secretary and she was pregnant. I didn't know how to respond to that. He told me he loved me, but she was having his child. The first thing that came to my mind was what a horrible father he would make. I felt sorry for the child. He would have a cheating father that only cared about himself. We argued, and I told him he could have his girlfriend and her baby. I was getting a divorce and would be out of the apartment by the end of the week. I stayed with my parents that night, and my dad and I went to the apartment the next day early, and I took all my personal things. Everything else had to go through court. We owed about as much as we owned. He liked to show off and always spent a lot of his money and some of mine too. We split what we had left, and I was able to keep my vehicle and the money I had put away before we were married, so I pretty much started over. I'm renting a nice apartment, and I got most of the furniture I wanted. He's in his hall, I said. What? She said. Your ex is in his hall. He had a wonderful woman who works with kids, and if you don't mind me saying so, is quite attractive. It made her blush. All he could think about was himself. I think you're much better off. We finished our lunch, and Beth said she felt much better now. Rather than telling her my hard luck story, I told her maybe we could get together, and I would tell her about it another time. I had 2 drinks, but had no idea how many Beth drank since she was there before I arrived. I asked her if I could take her home, seeing she might have drunk too much. Jay, you're very nice, but I don't think I'm ready, she interrupted. Beth, I'm just going to drive you home in your car to make sure you make it home safe. I'll call a cab, and he can bring me back here to get my vehicle. I promise that's all. I just want to get you home safely. You can ask Joe, the bartender. I'm an okay guy, I smiled. We got up, and I walked her to her car. She wasn't drunk, but why take any chances? I drove her home and walked her to her apartment door. I had already called for a taxi to come to her place and get me before I left the lounge. She thanked me for caring for her well-being. I asked her if I could call her, and she smiled and gave me her phone number. I did ask her if there were any apartments for rent that she knew about. I would be moving all my things in the following days. Her block was all condo units, and a lot of them were rented. She told me she would ask around and let me know if she found anything. It was a nice neighborhood, and most of the apartments were 2 or 3 bedrooms. Beth's was a 2-bedroom. She told me my cab arrived, and I handed her the keys to her car and apartment. We said our goodbyes, and I went home to what I knew would be one sea of an argument. I'll explain exactly what happened. A lot of it I probably won't be telling Beth. My wife, Linda, and I met right after I graduated from a community college. I took a 2-year course to become a claims adjuster. Linda was an offender bender, and I stopped by her work to see how bad the damage was to her car. I explained to her what the company would give her for the damage. I worked for an insurance company that repaired a lot of the small damage claims in their own designated body shops. If a customer chose to go elsewhere, we would write them a check. Linda chose to use our designated body shop for her car. That is, her body didn't need anything. I was attracted to her almost instantly. She worked for a small newspaper, and at the time, she did some ads and even took some of the photographs. I asked her out, and she accepted. We started going out all the time. The first time we had sex together was great. It wasn't 7 months before we got married. We had 2 kids in the next 2 years. Linda's mother watched the kids while Linda and I worked. I was in charge of a 4-county area, and sometimes I might spend a night or 2 away from home as my territory was mostly farm country. It all depended on my schedule. Neither of us seemed to have a problem with it. Linda was a good mother, and I thought I was a pretty good father. We would take the kids on vacations and to the amusement parks, zoo, and most everywhere families went. Our love life was fairly regular, especially when I was gone for a day or 2. I never cheated on her, even though I had a lot of opportunities in my line of work. She had gotten a promotion a few years ago. She did a lot more in advertising and often did supplements that were added to the paper. She did reviews on a lot of the new and renovated businesses that were in town and surrounding areas. It was only about 6 months ago that she seemed to change. Even the kids noticed. My daughter started at the local college and was in her first year but lived at home. My son was a senior in high school and would be graduating. He was already accepted at the same college Linda seemed to argue with all of us more often. I told the kids that it was probably due to a change of life and we would have to live with it. I thought I'd do something special for Christmas and ordered tickets for a holiday cruise. We would be leaving Christmas Eve and return on New Year's Day. Maybe it would put our marriage back on track. I was going to keep it a secret until after Thanksgiving. She often told me I wasn't that much fun anymore. I didn't know what she expected from me. Maybe it was that we were wanting different things now. I didn't really know. Dad said, "My daughter Becky, my mom's always going out when you're not home. She never used to go out that often." I asked her, "Where are you going?" And she told me, "Out with her girlfriends." "So why are you telling me this? Don't you believe her?" I asked. I didn't say I didn't believe her, but she goes out sometimes twice a week. It's always when you're not home. She does get home by midnight, but I guess it bugs me, she said. I talked to Linda the following day and asked her about going out, and she kind of barked at me. I haven't done anything wrong. I go out with my friends and some of my clients. The kids are grown and pretty much on their own. I get bored when you're gone, so I go out once in a while. I mentioned to Becky that I talked with her mom and explained what she told me. Did you ever see her friends? I asked. A couple of times when they got out of the car to let Mom in. To be honest, I think they were way overdressed. They always had their hair done and wore sexy long dresses. It would be what you would expect to see in Las Vegas or something. One woman was black, but Mom said it was one of her clients. It had something to do with a new nightclub opening up, she said. How does Mom dress? Does she dress the same as these other women? No, but she does wear some sexy clothes. She's even borrowed a few of my outfits, which I know are too tight on her. I wish she would just get back to being Mom. Hopefully, this is just another phase she's going through, she said. It made me wonder when Becky said another phase. Did Linda do things like this before, but the kids never mentioned it to me? I've always trusted her, so I never had reason to check on her. Becky was a really smart girl and had a tendency to notice changes. I asked my son Brian about it, and he said he thought the women Linda went out with were hot, but agreed with Becky that they always seemed to overdress. He also didn't care to see his mother in too short of a dress. Linda was rather short. She was only 5 feet 1 inch and weighed 120 pounds. She worked hard to look good, and it paid off. One evening, Linda called me on my cell phone and told me she was going out to dinner with one of her clients to one of the lounges. It was about 30 minutes outside of town. She would be a couple of hours late getting home. I just happened to be in the general area of the lounge looking at a wrecked Must and an even more wrecked driver and decided to stop in and see what was going on for myself. I walked in the door and told the greeter that my wife was sitting there and I needed to talk with her. I walked over to the table and surprised Linda. "Jay, what are you doing here?" she asked and seemed a bit nervous. Across from her was a woman that looked really sexy. It was like the kids had told me. She looked and dressed like a model. She just stared at me. I was right down the road when I got your call. "Who is your friend?" I asked. "Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. This is my client Charlie. Charlie, this is my husband Jay." Charlie held out her hand in kind of a limp way. "Jay, I'm sorry, but this is a business dinner. Charlie and I need to discuss a new nightclub that she and some of her friends are opening up in the next month or so. They're giving me the exclusive story. I shouldn't have stopped in, but I was just down the road." "I'll see you in a couple of hours," Linda said. "Charlie, it was nice meeting you." I gave Linda a quick kiss. I knew she was irritated, but I didn't care. I left the lounge and called the kids and told them Mom was out with one of her clients and that I was taking them out for pizza. I talked with them and told them I met their mom's friend Charlie. They were right about her friends being overdressed, but she was quite striking. I explained to them that their mother told me about a new club that would be opening up, and she was getting the exclusive. I think they were at least glad that I knew what was going on. We ate our pizza, and they each told me about school. When Linda got home, she told me how much I embarrassed her. She said I humiliated her. What the duck? All I did was stop in and say hi to my wife. I knew when she was like this that it didn't do any good to argue with her. She even insinuated that I almost made her lose her exclusive story. What the duck was she hiding? I knew something was wrong here, but couldn't put my finger on it. The first thing I thought, if I found out she was sleeping with another man, I wasn't sure how I would handle it. She was the mother of my kids. Here I was thinking the worst. For the next couple of weeks, she wouldn't hardly talk to me unless she had to. She acted nice at our son's graduation, but I think it was just for show. Her parents and my parents were both there. We definitely had to talk about our marriage and where it might be headed. I hadn't had to stay away from home since I met Charlie. She hadn't gone out with her friends either. That even got me wondering. On Wednesday, I told her I would be gone Friday overnight, but I'd be home Saturday morning. She didn't say anything to me and left for work. I really didn't have to stay anywhere, but if what Becky said was true, Linda would be going out. The worst that would happen is that I would be wrong and spend a night in a motel. I called home around 8 o'clock in the evening, and Brian told me that his mother left to go out with her girlfriends. A woman had just come by and picked Linda up. She told Brian she would be home late because they were going to a party in the next town. He told me the name of the club. I knew where it was. It wasn't the type of club where married women and mothers should be going. I went in and was surprised how full the place was. I got myself a drink and went up to the second floor. It was more of a balcony, but there were a few tables there. I met a woman who probably worked at the bar. I figured if she was working there, she would be good cover since I decided I would look pretty conspicuous sitting there. I bought her a drink. She was talking to me, and I was trying to pay attention to her, but at the same time, I wanted to find Linda. I finally located her on the lower level at a table with Lisa, a divorced friend of hers that she said she didn't hang around with anymore. If she and Lisa were friends again, I knew it was trouble. Lisa was accused in her divorce of running a whorehouse out of a bar she managed. Linda told me she never knew anything about it. I had no real reason at the time to not believe her. After Lisa got divorced, I heard she left town, but now I remember it was Linda that told me that. They were with two other women that seemed overdressed again. One was Charlie, and I had no idea who the other one was, but she seemed Asian. Charlie's one hand was holding Linda's, but her other hand was on Linda's thigh. Duck. I sat there a while to see how much friendlier they would get. Charlie seemed tall, but was wearing really high heels. Next to Linda, most women looked tall. The Asian woman seemed a bit shorter. Both looked glamorous yet out of place. The gal I was with was happy that I kept buying her drinks. That was her job, to get me to buy her as many drinks as possible and possibly to get me to play with her for money. Of course, well, what the duck, for everything else, there's MasterCard, right? She called herself Bambi and asked me if I wanted to get a room. She saw me watching Linda down below and asked me if that turned me on. She reached over and put her hand on my crotch and said, "It sure doesn't feel like it. What are you into? I can get it for you." I told her I was having a bad day, but maybe I'd be back another day. I saw Linda and the other three women get up and walk toward the door. I said goodbye to Bambi and gave her $20. I headed downstairs and followed my wife and her friends to the parking lot. Linda got into a car with Charlie, while Lisa and the other woman got in another vehicle. Needless to say, I followed Linda, and they drove about a mile and into a motel. They didn't even stop at the check-in counter. They must have had the room already reserved and had gotten their key cards. I was about to walk up to the counter when I saw Lisa and the Asian woman getting out of their car. I stood out of the way in case Lisa recognized me. They also walked past the counter and went up in the elevator. I walked up to the reservation desk. I took a chance and asked the reservation clerk if my wife, Linda Bradford, made our reservations. She was often forgetful. The desk clerk smiled and checked his computer. Yes, sir, she made the reservation this morning. I didn't know if I was lucky or sad that she was paying for this room. At least I was able to get the information I wanted. I asked him if she left me a key card. May I see some identification, please? He was nice and just doing his job. I showed him my driver's license. He informed me that she was given both of them earlier today. I could get another, but it would be a $5 charge. I shook my head and said, I'll make her give me the money back for this, as I handed him the $5. He smiled and said his wife was always forgetting things too as he handed me a new card. They were in room 421. The room was registered for 2 people, so there was no reason for him to doubt me. I wasn't sure what I would say or how I would handle this. Unless she could be very convincing, our marriage just might be over. I actually hoped that they would be just sitting there talking business, but in my gut, I knew better. The only business you sneak into a motel room for is the kind you don't talk about. This was a 2-room suite. It had been a good 20 minutes since they had entered the motel. I used the key card and slowly opened the door. I could hear them in the adjoining room. I really felt stupid standing there. I've read a lot of stories about husbands doing this, but it was harder than I would have thought. I couldn't believe the mess in this room. They must have disrobed as soon as they walked in the room. Clothes were thrown everywhere. I saw my wife's dress and what I figured was her personal clothing. I could hear sounds coming from the next room. I knew it was Linda moaning. I've heard her for the last 20 years. It made my stomach jump. My wife was being unfaithful with another woman. I had to ask myself, why was I even here? But I knew I had to know. I walked through the door. There on the bed was Linda. I couldn't believe what I saw. Charlie, son of a bitch, was a guy. They both looked over at me and were shocked. Charlie looked at me and said, "Please don't hurt me." Linda lay there in shock, not even speaking. If he didn't do what I said, I would dot him up. "No, don't do this in front of my husband," screamed out Linda. I guess she got her voice back. I told her to shut up. After tonight, I would no longer consider her my wife. I wanted some answers. I asked Charlie if he was a guy or something. He told me he was a female impersonator. He wasn't a guy. It seems that Lisa was opening a new nightclub a ways out of town. She was having a female impersonator as well as many other acts. She contacted Linda and told her she could have exclusive rights to write about and take pictures of the new nightclub. She had invited her over to meet 3 of the female impersonators, Charlie, the Asian guy, and another one that I hadn't seen. They would go around to the different lounges in town to promote Lisa's nightclub. Hardly anyone knew they were female impersonators. They sure bluffed me. They didn't talk too much because it might give them away. Linda was still crying into her pillow. I asked Charlie one more question. Did she play all 3 of you? Did she ever tell you she couldn't or wouldn't do it? Charlie looked at me and said, "No, we never forced her. She was always willing." I had taken pictures with my cell phone through the whole ordeal. I went to the other room and cut up the clothes. I had to get rid of this rage, and it was the only thing I could think of. Charlie sat there scared. I really thought of it out of him, but it wouldn't have accomplished anything but get me busted and sent away. No thanks. I told Linda not to come home tonight. I would be moving out and seeing a lawyer. I walked out, returned the key card to the desk clerk, and left. I should have felt better, but I didn't. I got home, and both of my kids were there. I told my kids that I had caught their mothers cheating on me and would be moving out and getting a divorce. I didn't tell them any of the particulars. Becky cried and said she hated her mother. Don't say that, Becky. Love your mother but hate what she has done. She has always loved you kids. I don't know why she did what she did, but I can no longer stay married to her. I could never trust her again. Where are you going? Asked Brian. He was trying to play the cool grown-up guy, but I could tell he was near tears himself. I'll be staying with your grandparents until I find a nice apartment. You kids can stay here with your mother. You'll be on your own soon enough. You can always call me if you need anything. The deal with your college still stands for both of you. I'll pay my share like we agreed. I packed a few suitcases with my personal things and spent my last night in the house. Becky even made me breakfast the next morning. Needless to say, Linda never came home that night. My parents were devastated when I told them I was getting a divorce due to Linda cheating on me. They asked me if there was any chance of us mending the fences, and I told them not a chance. Becky called me and said her mother was dropped off at noon by some guy. It was the same car that the woman had picked her up in the night before. I didn't have the heart to tell her that the woman and the guy were the same person. The following Monday, I went to see my friend Bob, who was a lawyer, and explained what I knew and wanted him to start divorce proceedings. I wanted to get the accounts settled and equity divided. I told him that even though she cheated, I would use irreconcilable differences because of the kids. If she were to fight the divorce, I would file for adultery and name names, including her friend Lisa. I had my phone with me at the motel and had taken picture after picture of Lisa getting duck and etc. I did make copies of those photos and told my lawyer to send a copy of them along with the divorce papers. I asked him to put a rush on it. He had it ready by the following Friday and had it delivered to her workplace. She tried to call me time and time again, but I wouldn't take her calls. She even called my parents, but my dad told her he wasn't interested in her side at the present time. One thing I found out was Becky did her own investigation. She told me that she heard that Linda's old friend Lisa was back in town and was opening up a nightclub. I almost had to laugh when she told me that there were going to be female impersonators, and she had to wonder if that was the woman her mom was going out with. My girl was smart. You knew that, didn't you, Dad? She said after telling me, you caught Mom with one of them, didn't you? I told her that I did know, but anything else she could ask her mom. She said her mom would hardly speak to her or Brian. It always ended up in an argument about Linda ruining it for our family. She did say Mom would go in her room and cry a lot. My lawyer had all our joint accounts frozen. Neither of us could access them. I had a credit card of my own that I was able to use. I was sure Linda had one in her name only. Also, a lot of our bills were paid automatically from our checking account. Only they wouldn't get paid. It would only be for a couple of weeks. We could both survive till then. The day the papers were served was the day I went to the lounge and met Beth. I knew I had to go home and face Linda. She would have received the divorce papers, and I wanted to get on with my life. I called ahead, and Linda answered the phone. I told her I would be there for our final talk. I knocked on the door, and Linda opened it. It's still your house, too. You could have come in. I received the divorce papers. I couldn't believe you made copies of those pictures, she said, all that as I entered the door. Are you going to sign the papers and get this marriage over with? You never gave me a chance to explain anything. We can work this out. I know we can. I love you, Jay. She had tears in her eyes. You don't love me any more than the man in the moon. You're scared of being on your own. You want to explain things to me? I'll tell you what I know, and if I'm wrong, then you can correct me. You cheated on me. You weren't forced or even manipulated. It goes back to when you told me you didn't know about Lisa and her who-use rumor has it you got your goodies off way back then. Who told you that? Asked the nervous Linda. No one ever said anything to me, but I thought I would mention it and see her reaction. I'm not telling you anything now. Your friend Lisa is back in town, so you figured you could play around on me again. Only this time, you got caught. I do believe that you did get the job of writing the story of the new nightclub. Playing around with the female impersonators was a bonus. If anyone we knew saw you with them, all you had to do is say they're your clients. No one would question that. I can't believe you cheated all these years. We had a good life. I almost wish I never found out, but you kept pushing the envelope. Now that I found out the truth, you make me sick. I don't even want to know how many men you've been with. I wouldn't believe you anyway. Right off the bat, we both know you played Charlie, the Asian, and the other guy. I don't even want to know the rest. Please, Jay, let me speak. I'm sorry, I really am. I was wrong. I can change. All I need is a chance to prove it to you. Just give me another chance. Becky said you bought cruise tickets for the holidays for us. Let's go together and start over. I will use the tickets, and I will be starting over. But it won't be with you. To me, you are dead. I want you to sign the papers and get this sham of a marriage over. If you don't, I will refile using adultery and use all the pictures you have copies of. According to our state, everything is 50-50ths. I suggest we divide everything in half. You can have the house, and I will get half the value out of our savings. There is very little I want from the house other than a few of my personal items that belong to me. I want nothing that has anything to remind me of you. I'm waiting 2 days, and if my lawyer hasn't received your signed papers, I will refile using adultery. Don't test me because you will lose. Just think of your parents and all your friends and your kids seeing the pictures. Everyone knowing you cheated is one thing, seeing the evidence is another. 2 days. That's all you get. I turned around and walked out. Linda signed the divorce papers and had them returned to my lawyer the next day. He had a document drawn up dividing our assets down the center. I would receive the bulk of our savings, and she, in turn, would get the house and the furnishings. I would have my name removed from our checking account and joint credit cards. We each would keep our vehicles, and there would be no child support since our kids were over 18. Needless to say, there would be no alimony. We would both keep our retirement programs. I had already promised the kids I would pay my share for their education. They'd have to work part-time during the years and summers, but they wouldn't have to borrow. Bob explained to Linda that he would take the papers to a judge for approval. If she wanted, she could get her own attorney and have the proposed decree looked over. Linda told him that she just wanted it over with now. Bob told me she looked dejected. I guess she thought since we were married so many years that I might give her another chance. She knows I have always been fair with her and would never do anything to hurt the kids. I guess you could say she trusted me, something I didn't have for her anymore. Becky told me Linda cried when she heard that I had planned a holiday cruise for the two of us as a getaway and starting over without the kids at home. She knew that this time she went too far and got caught. When Bob came back from the judge, he told me I could go and pick up my personal items. He even asked Linda if she wanted to be there when I got my stuff. She told him she didn't. She actually trusted me. I was able to get the few things I wanted in 2 loads in a pickup truck. Dad said I could store them in the basement. I really didn't have much. The following day I got a call. May I speak to Jay Bradford, please? This is he. What can I do for you? It was a woman's voice. This is Beth. Beth Williams, we met a week ago. You asked me to check on available apartments in our area. I couldn't believe she was calling me. The tone of my voice changed. Beth, I'm sorry that I talked so stern. It's been a pretty bad week for me. I'm so glad to hear from you. You mentioned apartments. Is there something available for rent near you? As a matter of fact, there is. It's a couple of doors down. An older couple just moved out, and the owners haven't put up a for rent sign yet. Are you interested? Yes, of course. I can be at your place in an hour. Would you mind going over there with me? I'll take you out for dinner afterwards, she agreed, and I quickly cleaned up and went to see her and the apartment. Beth seemed so gentle and easygoing. We went and looked at the apartment. It had 2 bedrooms, and they supplied the stove and refrigerator. It even had a microwave oven. I told the agent I would take it. I could move in the following weekend after they finished cleaning it. The lease would be for 6 months at a time after giving them a deposit and the first month's rent. I took Beth to the Red Lobster for dinner. I told her that I was a bit nervous, that I hadn't dated for 20 years. If I do anything wrong, please tell me, I said. I told her a little about my life and where I worked, also that I now had 2 kids in college. She asked about the divorce, and I told her it was in the 60-day waiting period. After that, I would be a single divorced person. I told her that I had caught my wife cheating on me. There was no way she could deny it since I had photos, but I left out Charlie and company. I mentioned, and we went around and around about the divorce and how she promised she wouldn't do it again. I found out it wasn't the first time, and there was no way I could ever trust her again. Your wife is a mess, said Beth as she smiled at me. I remember telling her the same thing about her husband. We both laughed. I liked being with her. She was so kind and gentle. We had dinner and talked a while longer, then I drove her home. Beth, thank you for everything. I want to see you again, I said. Jay, after this weekend, we'll be neighbors. I found myself holding her hands. I'll see you Saturday, I said. I left, but I really didn't want to go. She was like the opposite of Linda. I wanted to get to know her better. On Saturday, I brought some of my furniture to the apartment. I had taken a bedroom set out of the basement, as well as a few other items. Dad and I were carrying in the dresser when Beth appeared at the door. Need any help? She asked. I had my car full of kitchen stuff my mom gave me. Most of it, she told me I needed some stuff. Beth helped put the stuff in the cupboards. I introduced her to Dad. We went back to get another load of furniture. It was items for the living room. Beth rode over with me in the car. Mom was surprised, but very happy to meet her. I told Mom that Beth found the apartment for me and was my neighbor. After we finished unloading the furniture and putting my items away, Dad headed for home. I asked Beth if she wanted to go out again for dinner as a thank you for helping me out. Can we go back to the lounge where we met and get a Reuben sandwich? Asked Beth. I love the idea, I said. When we walked in, Joe waved to us. It was toward evening and a bit more crowded. Shouted, we were seated in order to drink till our food arrived. Beth told me more about herself than that she had an older sister. She said she told her sister about me and her sister couldn't believe she let me take her home. Now she wants to meet you. I guess she's worried about me being on a rebound, I told her. I told her you were getting divorced and she nearly went off the deep end. When we got back to Beth's apartment, we were holding hands again. This time I leaned forward and kissed her gently on the lips. I'm sorry, but I wanted to do that since I met you, I said. She stared at me but didn't really say anything about it. Good night, Jay. Don't forget you have to meet my sister next week before she goes berserk. I walked to my apartment and spent my first night in my new home. The next day I went to Mom and Dad's for dinner. They asked me if I heard any more from Linda. I told them that it was over and I was just waiting for the time to go by till my divorce was final. Mom brought up Beth and I told her what I knew about her. I waited a couple of days before I called Beth. I didn't want to push myself on her. I asked her out for dinner, but she said for me to come over and she would make us some spaghetti. Needless to say, I said yes. We sat on the couch and used TV trays, ate dinner, and watched TV. I loved being with her. She was so easy to talk to. I knew I had to go home since she had to teach school the next day. At the door, I kissed her again, not passionately but very gently, and said good night. We went to visit her sister Sandy. I was somewhat on edge. I really didn't know what to expect. Sandy had made dinner for us and I met her husband Tom and her 2 teenage kids. She asked me what I did for a living and I told her about my job and where I went to college. I told her kids that I had 2 kids in college and what they were studying. They said they hoped to go to college someday also. After dinner, Tom and I went in the living room and had a cup of coffee. We were the same age and seemed to have a lot in common. When the girls came back in, Sandy seemed to be a lot nicer. Beth told me on the way home that her sister approved of me. We both laughed. This time before I left to go home, I told her I liked being with her. She said she liked me too. Jay, I don't mind dating you. In fact, I like being around you. It's just that I won't sleep with you till your divorce is final, she said. I told her it was fine with me. I just like being with her. We began to have dinner together at least twice a week. On weekends, we would have dinner at her parents' house or mine. We were a couple even though we hadn't slept together. A week before my divorce was final, I introduced Beth to Becky and Brian. We all went out to dinner together. I told the kids that I didn't want to hear anything about their mom. The kids loved Beth. We went out for pizza and the kids asked Beth a few questions, not really that many, but they did ask her a lot. They were so happy that I found someone so I wasn't alone. They even told Beth that, and she just laughed. She was that easy to get along with. Becky surprised me when she asked Beth a question. Would you go on a cruise over the holidays with Dad? He's got tickets to leave on Christmas Eve and return on New Year's Day. I was dumbfounded. I thought about asking Beth when the time was nearer. Beth, said Becky, she's a woman. She needs to know ahead of time to plan her wardrobe. I know you care for her, or you wouldn't have asked us to come meet her. Beth, it is true. I do have 2 tickets for a holiday cruise. I was going to ask you after my divorce was final next week, but a certain young lady let the cat out of the bag. I know it's a big decision, and I understand, I said. Yes, I'll go, Beth interrupted me. I'd love to go on a cruise with you. As for Becky, she was right. A woman needs more time to plan. Don't be so hard on her. I watched her smile at Becky. I could feel the sincerity in her voice. The following week my divorce was final, and I was not at all unhappy. I asked Beth if she wanted to go out and celebrate with me. She was more than happy to go. She mentioned that a new nightclub had opened up just out of town, and would I like to go there? I never told her the particulars of my divorce and told her we could check it out. She told me that some of the teachers at school said they had female impersonators and also famous people impersonators like Elvis, Ricky Nelson, and many others. I knocked on her door, and she looked beautiful. She had on a black dress that enhanced her figure and was about 6 inches above her knees. I remember telling her, I never had a teacher that looked like you when I went to school. We invited Sandy and Tom to go with us. I didn't know what to expect or if I should say anything to Beth. The place was crowded but was really like a Las Vegas nightclub. We were seated at a table and ordered drinks. The impersonators were exceptionally good. They looked and sounded like the original stars. We ordered dinner, and while we were eating, the female impersonators came on stage. My God, those can't be guys, said Tom. Easy fella, said a laughing Sandy. You put your hand in their pants, and you might not like what you find. They lip-synced to songs by famous female singers, and of course, it was the original voices we heard. I did recognize the one they called Charlie, the Asian was named Kim, and the black person who I saw for the first time was Sable. Their acts were good, but I didn't like the visions that I got in my head. I knew Linda was very familiar with all 3 of them. There was some dancing after the show, and I knew I couldn't lie to Beth. I told her the truth about Linda and that I caught her with one of the impersonators. I told her there was no way I wanted to keep secrets from her. Beth kissed me. I read your wife's article on the nightclub. I asked you to bring me here hoping you would be honest with me. I felt you were hiding something since you never mentioned anything about where your ex worked or who she was with. I knew this was a nice club from the people at school, so I wasn't trying to trick you. I love you, Jay. I don't have any doubts. Hey, you two, get a room, laughed Sandy. I intend to as soon as we leave here, replied Beth. Beth, I never lied to you. There were some things that I didn't care to remember. I'm sorry if you thought differently. I love you, Jay, and want you to know you can tell me anything. You don't need to hold anything in. I'm here for you if you ever need to talk. We left the club and dropped off Sandy and Tom. They thanked us for a wonderful evening and said we should do it again sometime. On the way home, I asked Beth, your place or mine? Yours, please, was her answer with a smile. We went to my apartment. I couldn't actually believe I was nervous. I hadn't been with another woman in over 20 years, and it had been over 3 months since I was with Linda. Beth looked at me and said, "Do you love me, Jay?" I'm not used to giving myself to men. Ray, my ex, was only the second man I have been with. I have always been shy about dating, but with you, it seems different. Yes, I do feel I love you. All I can think about is making you happy. It's going to be different and new for both of us. With that said, we kissed gently yet with passion. We went into my bedroom. After that night, we spent all our nights together. Sometimes at her apartment, others at mine. We didn't have sex every night, but we did cuddle a lot. It was time for us to get ready for the cruise. It was funny, but her parents and my parents were old-fashioned and weren't keen on us going as single people. They didn't say it outright, but we both could feel it. Our parents did say in their day they didn't travel like that, people would be married first. I told them things were different now. I did take Becky and Brian aside and told them I might ask Beth to marry me. Would they have any problems with that? After all, I'd only be divorced a little over a month. They were happy for me and told me they loved Beth and they knew she made me happy. I did tell them that Beth and I never talked about it and she might want to wait. I just wanted to know how they felt about it. We flew down to Florida on Christmas Eve. The cruise ship was beautiful and we had a cabin with a queen-sized bed. We attended the greeting meeting, for lack of another word. They told us about the ship rules and a lot of functions that would take place in the week ahead. We were both very excited. The ship would be leaving the dock within the hour. Beth and I stood on the deck and looked out across the ocean. "What is it, Jay? Is there something you want to tell me?" "No secrets, remember," said Beth. I smiled at her. I had tears in my eyes and told her how much I loved her. Maybe I was just caught up in the moment. "What is it, Jay?" "You can tell me," said Beth. I reached in my pocket and pulled out a ring. "Beth, I know we haven't known each other all that long. You might think that this is much too early in our relationship, but I know how I feel about you. Will you marry me?" "Oh my God, yes, of course, I will." "When do you want to get married?" "Tonight, on this ship." I asked the captain, and he said he could do it. He has all the necessary papers. He's done it many times. "So, will you marry me tonight, and this can be our honeymoon vacation cruise?" Needless to say, I really want to save my pocket, so I planned my honeymoon vacation here on a cruise. We both knew that a lot of people would say we should get to know each other longer, but we were both sure what we wanted. We wanted to be together. Beth cried as she said yes. I contacted the captain, and he announced on the loudspeaker that there would be a wedding in the main dining hall an hour after the ship set out. I went and put on my suit and waited in the dining hall for Beth. She came out dressed in a beautiful blue gown. She later told me she bought it to wear on New Year's Eve, but this was a much better occasion. The hall was packed with well-wishers. Everyone likes a surprise wedding. As soon as we said our I do's, everyone cheered. The first thing we did was call our parents, also Becky and Brian, to let them know we were married. We could hear crying on the other end of the phone on each call. We went into one of the many lounges and danced. The captain said the buffet was set up for dinner, and we would be the first ones to get our food. It was a wonderful start to a great honeymoon and a new life. During our cruise, we toured 3 islands, ate lots of food, and danced every night away. No day went by that we didn't make love. The New Year's evening party was great, but we'd been partying all week. We made sure we brought in the new year with a real bang. As we got off the plane when we returned, Sandy and Tom were waiting for us. Needless to say, both Beth and Sandy were crying. "You take care of my little sister, do you hear me?" said Sandy. I gave Sandy a hug and said, "I'll always be there for her." They took us out for dinner, and we told them about the cruise. We headed back home, and we moved into Beth's apartment. We talked with my landlord, and he said I could move out but wouldn't be able to get my deposit back. We decided to do that since it was the cheapest way out. Life went on, and we enjoyed our life. Sometimes we went out for dinner, other times we stayed home. We spent most of our free time together. I spent very few nights on the road, only when it was absolutely necessary. I wanted to be home with Beth. I got home one day, and Beth looked at me differently. I couldn't place the look. Okay, what's the problem? I don't know that look. Did I do something wrong? I'll leave that up to you to decide. You got me pregnant, she said, tears in her eyes. What? When? How? I mean, I thought you said you weren't able to have kids. I probably looked shocked out of my mind. She looked at me. The what is I'm pregnant? The when would have been about 3 months ago, more than likely the time of our honeymoon. The how would be we made love for days on end. I asked the doctor that I thought she said I couldn't have kids because of all my physical conditions. She told me that she had said it would be much harder to have kids, but not impossible. So, are you happy or mad? You still look shocked. I hugged her and told her that I thought it was wonderful. We both started over, and we'll have our own baby. I was a very happy man and future father-to-be, again. I tell you a few things we found out after getting back from our honeymoon. Beth had talked to her sister and was told that her ex-husband, Ree, had married his secretary. They wanted to be married before the birth of the baby. When the baby was born, it was not white, the baby boy was Mexican. Now Ree wants an annulment, but his secretary is fighting it. Becky and Brian are doing well in college. They are getting along much better with their mother. It seems that the night that Beth and I went to the nightclub, Linda was there. According to Becky, it made her mom realize the man she lost. She still has her job at the magazine, and she does date some. She hasn't brought anyone home for the kids to meet. According to Becky, Linda and Lisa are no longer friends. She put some of the blame for her situation on Lisa. The last time Lisa was seen, she was leaving the country and moving to Amsterdam. As for me and Beth, we couldn't be happier. After the birth of the baby, Beth will take a short leave of absence. She wants to return to teaching, and we already have 2 grandmothers who are willing to babysit. My reaction, it's so strange how 2 people down on their luck meet in a bar of all places, and their lives change completely. Life is great if you have the right people to share it with. The story told here is captivating and inspiring. It demonstrates how chance encounters and unexpected twists of fate can lead to profound changes in people's lives. Important themes such as love, family, second chances, and loyalty form the foundation of this narrative, making it universal and relatable. This story offers hope and inspires belief in a brighter future, even when today may seem dark and hopeless.